After her parents died in a tragic accident, she was taken in by her uncle, only to be treated like absolute garbage and branded high society's ultimate scandal maker. Everyone expected her banishment to a strict convent to leave her a broken, helpless victim. But instead of crying, she came back stronger than ever. An imperial banquet celebrating victory in the Keyframe War is in full swing, and for some attendees, the dazzling atmosphere is practically suffocating. Our girl is currently standing on the sidelines, desperately wishing she could just evaporate and go home. She watches her uncle and a blonde girl named Bella holding court in the crowded room. The onlookers are absolutely fawning over Bella, praising her as the dazzling golden rose of Genoa. Her uncle basks in the compliments, casually claiming she grew up perfectly all on her own. He then loudly throws our girl under the carriage, comparing his precious golden rose to his foster daughter. He complains that his foster daughter is completely ungrateful for being taken in and does nothing but drag around scandals, earning herself the delightful nickname of the scandal maker. Hearing this absolute disrespect, our girl reflects on how her life was completely overturned 9 years ago. On a supposedly beautiful, starry night in Genoa, a boat sank in Albert's Park, taking her parents with it and leaving her entirely alone. Her kind uncle stepped in to take her, but the narrative quickly flipped. While the other girl bloomed into the family's golden child, our girl was painted as the ungrateful stray who only raised thorns and disgraced the family name. Back in the present, our girl mentally shrugs off the harsh gossip. She is completely used to it by now and decides to make a quiet exit before anyone else notices her existence. But right as she plans her escape, the grand hall plunges into total darkness. This sudden blackout is part of an old banquet tradition known as Genoa's Mark of the Night. The rules are simple. While the room is dark, a man secretly pins his brooch onto a lady's dress. If the lady waits while wearing the piece, the man returns, announces he has come to retrieve what he entrusted to her, and fully confesses his feelings. Our girl knows perfectly well that no one is lining up to give her a romantic confession. Still, a tiny desperate part of her wonders if an absolute miracle could happen. She hopes that if someone, absolutely anyone, came looking for her, she might finally have a ticket out of this miserable environment. Just as she reaches her hand up, the lights violently return. Bella is suddenly right there, grabbing her hand and acting deeply hurt that she was about to leave. Two of Bella's deeply toxic friends flank her, immediately firing shots. They loudly assume our girl was tucked away in a dark corner, just to lure in a man or farm for pity. Our girl listens to this snarky commentary and severely regrets not escaping when she had the chance. But then someone spots it. Pinned perfectly to her dress is a massive, sparkling brooch loaded with red and white crystals. Our girl is visibly confused. One of the salty friends immediately tries to downplay it, claiming the giant ruby is an out-of-date style probably left by some clueless, rich tycoon. Bella, playing the ultimate supportive friend, claps her hands and congratulates our girl on securing a super romantic confession. Our girl assumes the mystery man completely mistook her for someone else and detaches the brooch, planning to hold onto it just in case the owner comes looking. However, our girl realizes her poverty logic does not fly in this tax bracket when Bella insists she is being way too modest. The blonde one practically forces her to pin it right back onto her chest, arguing that it makes it easier for the love-struck man to find her. Our girl caves and pins it on, though she feels incredibly awkward about wearing such a precious item. She tells herself useless hopes only make the disappointment worse, while the toxic squad continues to gossip about who the mystery man could possibly be. Suddenly, a ridiculously handsome man approaches and confidently demands his property back. Our girl looks at him and her soul practically leaves her body for a permanent vacation as she realizes she has accidentally entangled herself with Duke Kaylas, the literal star of the entire victory banquet. Flustered, she scrambles to hand it back, insisting she will return it immediately. The realization that this is the Duke's personal brooch sends a massive shockwave through the room. Bella dramatically covers her mouth in fake horror, while the crowd immediately assumes our girl simply stole the expensive piece to stir up yet another massive scandal. Panic sets in, and our girl desperately tries to unpin the brooch, but her hair gets completely tangled in the clasp. The Duke steps in, looking deeply serious, and tells her to stop before she damages the piece. He removes it himself, and the atmosphere becomes incredibly tense as he steps uncomfortably close to her. Staring her down, the Duke demands to know exactly who he needs to speak to about this situation. He completely shatters any romantic illusion by announcing that the brooch is actually his late father's keepsake. He states coldly that it was pinned to the chest of a woman he has never met in his entire life, and he demands to know who is going to take responsibility for this massive insult to his family. The Duke's icy glare could freeze over hell as he firmly states that writing this situation off as the silly stunt of a naive young lady is way too dismissive. He explains the brooch carries massive significance. In reality, while everyone else is treating this victory banquet like the party of the century, the Duke is basically attending a memorial. The war they are celebrating is the exact same one that claimed his father's life, meaning this sparkling event is absolute torture for him. To make matters worse, his late father's keepsake somehow magically teleported onto the chest of high society's most notorious scandal maker, making it look like she is desperately begging for his personal attention. Our girl scrambles to defend herself, insisting there must be some kind of massive mistake. The Duke immediately hits back with a cold scoff, asking why guilty people always cling to the word misunderstanding. Our girl desperately tries to argue that she would never willingly possess the Duke's brooch, but before she can finish her sentence, her uncle comes charging in like a totally unhelpful bull in a china shop. He loudly shouts her name and shoves her head down into a forced, humiliating bow. He practically aggressively apologizes to the Duke, throwing our girl entirely under the carriage by claiming he failed to teach his niece properly. Our girl is absolutely stunned, trapped in a forced bow while the Duke just stares at his own hand in pure, uncomfortable silence. Right on cue, Bella slithers into the scene flashing an angelic smile. She totally fake pleads for the Duke to show mercy, loudly suggesting our girl only stumbled upon the precious item and wore it because she was desperate for a little attention. The background mean girls immediately join the chorus. One claims she explicitly told her to return the jewelry, while another loudly gossips that she is basically a menace who constantly tests her limits with men. Trapped in her humiliating bow with the entire room watching, our girl has a moment of mental clarity. She realizes making someone look like a fool is painfully easy, and she is a total fool for constantly falling for their traps. But she refuses to take this specific hit lying down. She lifts her head, looks the terrifying Duke dead in the eye, and fiercely states that she did not steal his family's brooch and never wanted the cursed thing to begin with. The Duke meets her gaze in total silence. The uncle frantically tries to offer some kind of financial compensation to smooth things over, but the Duke completely shuts him down. He coldly states that compensation will not be necessary since there was clearly no deliberate intent to offend him. He delivers a final, chilling blow, declaring he would rather they never cross paths over such a matter ever again, and promptly walks away. Fast forward to the family estate, and the absolute audacity of the uncle is on full display. He casually orders our girl to pack her bags and go live at the St. Clarissa convent for an entire year. He claims this forced exile is entirely for her own good, just until high society forgets about the incident. Our girl desperately tries to argue, reminding him she already explained that she never touched the Duke's brooch on purpose. Instead of listening, her uncle delivers a vicious slap across her face. The impact sends her crashing into a vase, which violently shatters on the floor. He screams at her to shut up, declaring the actual truth is completely irrelevant. He is absolutely terrified that if they offend the ducal family, their own household is entirely finished. He screams that she has to do as she is told for her own sake. Left crying on the floor, our girl reflects on the bitter irony of her situation. She is just the pitiful orphan entirely dependent on the so-called kindness of the uncle who took her in. Her mind drifts back to the exact moment her reputation was violently murdered. She remembers a young Bella panicking because a simple letter reply accidentally resulted in a marriage proposal. Her uncle had pulled our girl aside, demanding she take the fall because they could not let Bella marry just anyone. He told her to publicly claim she wrote the letter, promising it would just be one little scandal. When our girl hesitated, her uncle went full creep mode, heavily implying he would regret taking her in if she did not obey. That single moment was the birth of the scandal maker. From then on, it was an endless cycle of Bella begging for help, claiming she messed up again, promising it would be the very last time, and weaponizing the word family to make our girl take the blame. Snapping back to the harsh present, the uncle has the sheer nerve to offer his hand to help her up from the shattered vase. Gaslighting her like a true professional, he sighs and complains that she always makes him look like the bad guy. He begs her to just go to the convent and help them out this one last time. Looking at his outstretched hand, our girl is painfully reminded of the day little Bella first reached out to her. She knows with absolute certainty that this family's hand is not a saving lifeline, but a thorny vine designed to choke her. But the tragic reality is, without them, she has absolutely nothing. Defeated, she accepts his hand and agrees to do exactly as he says. Meanwhile, in a room that smells like expensive perfume and pure malice, Bella is lounging with a guy named Ted. They are sifting through a massive pile of party invitations and weird marriage proposals. Bella notices Ted is holding a flower and asks what the occasion is. Ted smirks, claiming he just has a feeling today is a day worth celebrating. He casually mentions that yesterday's little stunt could have been an absolute disaster. He had specifically instructed Bella to bring some random man's brooch to frame our girl and cause an awkward scene, but it somehow ended up being the terrifying Duke's heirloom. Ted shudders at the thought of the backlash hitting him instead, but then he shrugs it off, noting that the stunt was highly entertaining and made our girl incredibly uncomfortable, which was exactly what Bella wanted. Bella entirely agrees, praising Ted for making the whole thing so beautifully dramatic. She leans in and gives him a kiss to show her appreciation. But internally, Bella's ego is busy writing a whole different narrative. She secretly wonders if she might have actually caught the cold Duke's attention, entirely convinced the way he looked at her was anything but ordinary. Ted notices her spacing out and gets slightly insecure, asking if she is thinking about another man. Bella immediately plays the manipulator, reassuring him that no man out there could possibly compare to him. She casually lays back on the bed, telling Ted to come closer so she can reward him properly for handling such a bothersome job. Watching her act like an absolute villain, Ted asks a genuinely valid question. He wants to know why Bella despises her cousin so intensely, pointing out that she seems hellbent on utterly destroying her life. Bella does not have a tragic backstory or a deep complex reason. She simply shrugs and admits the cold truth. Our girl just gets under her skin. Out on a breezy balcony, a group of nobles are casually placing bets on a game and spilling tea like it is their full-time job. One guy desperately hopes his bet pulls through, while another completely pivots to the hottest rumor in high society. He loudly announces that the scandalous young lady from the victory banquet is officially being shipped off to a convent for an entire year. The Duke happens to be standing right there, completely unamused as the gossip flows. The men claim the Viscount simply exhausted his patience, noting that the girl had been a walking disaster long before the banquet incident. One guy even brings up a recent masquerade party, claiming she completely impersonated her cousin to fool some poor man. The alleged victim weakly defends himself, arguing it was way too dark to check her face properly. Hearing this absolute nonsense, the Duke is deeply annoyed. He deliberately let the whole banquet incident slide specifically, so his prestigious name would not get dragged into this cheap, vulgar gossip. Since he clearly resolved the issue then and there, he severely questions why the Viscount would suddenly banish her to a convent now. He wonders what exactly that manipulative family is trying to achieve. His internal detective work is interrupted when a man approaches, playfully asking whether he should address him as Cedric or his formal title. The Duke smoothly replies that his name is fine in private, but the title is necessary for an audience. This man is his uncle Benedict, the head of Kingsley County. Benedict puts on a deeply concerned face, noting that the Duke looks a bit thin from the burden of his father's passing. He boldly suggests the Duke can look at him as a father figure, pointing out that he and the late Duke were identical twins. The Duke mentally laughs at the sheer audacity. He knows his stoic father and mother would have massive opinions on that comparison. His real father was a fiercely loyal, terrifyingly upright knight who rarely smiled, making his presence a bit stifling. Benedict, on the other hand, speaks gently but is basically just a businessman. Less kindly, the Duke considers him a manipulative peddler who uses people to survive. No matter how much they share a face, the Duke knows he could never look at this man the way he looked at his father. Benedict completely ignores the internal roasting and pivots to business, handing over an invitation. He insists the Duke must attend an upcoming gathering to raise a toast and manage his retainers. He laughs enthusiastically, claiming the retainers will feel greatly assured by their new leader. The Duke calmly accepts the letter while privately assessing the political battlefield. He knows parasitic weeds are sprouting up everywhere, but rushing to pull them will only ruin the entire garden. It is far better to let them sway in the breeze until they naturally bend on their own. Benedict casually asks which side the Duke thinks will win the game playing out below. Tossing back his drink, the Duke decides his best strategy for now is to simply play the part of a mild, compliant boy who always backs the winning side. The scene aggressively shifts away from high society politics and directly into a bumpy carriage. Our girl is sitting alone, reading a horribly formal letter of admission to St. Clarissa Convent. The letter bluntly tells her to keep totally quiet, reflect on her actions, and promises a generous marriage portion upon her return. Staring at the paper, she flashes back to the freezing dining room where her family practically shoved her out the door. She realizes one bag was not nearly enough to pack her life. She tries to manifest some optimism, hoping her uncle will send winter clothes for the bitterly cold convent windows, and completely convinces herself she will be allowed back into her childhood home in just 1 year. Suddenly, the carriage violently jolts to a halt. The sheer force sends her suitcase flying, spilling her few belongings everywhere. The driver, Uncle Terry, frantically opens the door to apologize, explaining a rogue squirrel decided to test its luck in the middle of the road. Our girl completely brushes off the mess, assuring him it is fine. As Terry tries to help clean up, she picks up her most prized possession, a photograph of her with her actual loving parents. She tells Uncle Terry he does not need to help her clean and urges him to head straight back so he can enjoy a warm supper with his family. Instead of leaving, Terry hands her a simple package of bread. He admits it looks basic but promises it is still good, insisting she eat it since she must be exhausted. Our girl immediately tries to decline, knowing it is his own meal and assuming the convent will feed her. Just then, they spot the surviving squirrel safely making its way outside. Terry breathes in the remarkably clear air and gets hit with a massive wave of nostalgia. He tells our girl that escorting her brings back fond memories of when she was just a tiny kid, sharing her own snacks with him using her tiny hands. He softly asks her to accept the bread as his way of finally repaying that childhood kindness. With a warm smile, he promises her that as long as she eats well and keeps moving forward, the sun will always rise again. Completely moved by the only genuine kindness she has experienced in years, our girl smiles brightly, accepts the bread, and promises she will see him soon. Meanwhile, at the actual convent, the holy atmosphere is completely ruined by a massive gossip session. A group of nuns, led by Mother Catherine, are absolutely shook that this new girl is staying for an entire year. They agree it is an aggressively long timeout for simply reflecting on bad behavior. One nun happily shares the high society rumors, claiming our girl lured men into traps by pretending to be her cousin. The nuns dramatically sigh, complaining that their sacred convent is slowly transforming into a literal dumping ground for problematic noble brats. However, since the Holy See cut off their funds, they are painfully aware they have to rely on noble donations to keep the lights on. Because money talks, Mother Catherine orders the sisters to keep a hawk-like watch on the new arrival and carry out their responsibilities to the absolute maximum. Looking out the window, Catherine spots our girl stepping out of the carriage. Judging her completely on her reputation, Catherine assumes she is made of nothing but idle luxury and self-indulgence. She confidently believes that a year of strict, freezing guidance will fix her right up. Outside, entirely unaware of the judgment waiting for her, our girl steps toward the intimidating convent doors, her eyeballs practically sweating as she cries over her new, terrifying reality. Inside the convent, some snobby noble ladies are having a tea party and complaining about the cooler weather. One casually brags about living there in total luxury for just a modest donation, before the conversation shifts to the juiciest gossip available. A lady excitedly asks if they heard the infamous scandal maker arrived last week. They laugh, eagerly wondering how she plans to cause a massive, dramatic ruckus in a place with absolutely zero men. The reality, however, is significantly less glamorous. Our girl is currently sweating through intense manual labor, carrying a massive pile of supplies. Sister Agnes gently tells her to take multiple trips, but our girl just smiles through the pain. Sister Emma completely ignores her polite greeting, choosing instead to coldly lecture Agnes that the basket is way too heavy. Agnes cheerfully brushes off the negative energy, noting our girl has been working since dawn. Secretly, Agnes is struggling to reconcile this sweet, helpful girl with the terrifying rumors of a fierce manipulator. Mother Catherine ordered a hawk-like watch on her, but she just seems completely normal. To test the waters, Agnes assigns our girl to the intense soap-making process. She gives a strict safety briefing about boiling olive oil, water, and lye, emphasizing the need for non-stop stirring to avoid severe burns. Agnes mentally prepares for a spectacular noble meltdown, but our girl is absolutely thrilled to finally make the soap herself. Happily stirring the massive vat with a giant wooden paddle, our girl marvels at the process. Agnes is shocked by her genuine enthusiasm and explains that using high-quality olive oil creates a top-tier product. Our girl praises the quality, making Agnes beam with pride, especially since the exiled noble ladies absolutely refuse to use anything they make. Our girl totally dismisses the snobs, claiming it is their loss and flexing her glowing skin as proof the convent soap is superior. Sister Emma watches this entire interaction with deep suspicion. She thinks Agnes is way too easily won over and forgetting her strict monitoring orders. However, Emma's own icy resolve slightly wavers. She remembers hearing genuine, heartbroken sobbing coming from our girl's room on her first day. Since most exiled nobles only cry out of angry resentment, the authentic heartbreak deeply confused Emma. Back in her room, our girl completely collapses onto her bed, groaning from the intense physical labor while totally oblivious to the fact that Emma was glaring at her the entire time. Despite the exhaustion, she feels incredibly rewarded. She realizes the soap is a vital income source and could be massively popular in Genoa if only high society was not so obsessed with blinding colors and excessively fancy brand names. Looking out the window, she realizes she is adjusting incredibly well. Uncle Terry was right. The sun shines, the meals are healthy, and she has not had a single stomachache. Back at her toxic uncle's house, she was chronically sick. Her mind finally feels incredibly calm, and she wonders if this deep peace means the place is genuinely blessed by her late parents. The scene dramatically shifts from the holy convent to a ridiculously lavish party. A guest enthusiastically compliments Lord Benedict Kingsley on the splendid gathering, and Benedict smoothly hints at a very special toast later. His son, Albert, ruins the vibe by rudely asking if they are keeping the guest of honor, Cedric, waiting. Benedict firmly corrects him, stating the Kingsleys are the true guests of honor. He then drops some heavy manipulation tactics. Since the 25-year-old Cedric is traumatized from a brutal war and crushed by the massive weight of the dukedom, Benedict insists Albert must crawl to win his favor before anyone else does, coldly calling it pure business. Right on cue, Cedric arrives. Benedict immediately switches into his fake supportive uncle persona. A massive crowd of sycophants swarms Cedric, loudly flattering him and pointing out how much comfort his uncle, the late Duke's identical twin, must bring him. Cedric plays the diplomatic game flawlessly, but Benedict aggressively hijacks the event, forcing Cedric to give the first official toast. Up on a balcony, Albert deeply resents the political circus below. He bitterly reflects on his father previously shoving tedious Empress luncheons onto his younger brother Rowan. Rowan ended up meeting Princess Jeremiah there. Albert fumes that if his father had just tolerated the boring old ladies, he would have married royalty, saving them from the current humiliation of bowing to Cedric. Watching his father operate, Albert completely rejects the idea of crawling for favor. To Albert, business is simply the dark art of effectively using people, a sinister realization perfectly timed with the arrival of Bella making her grand entrance. Still in the sparkling ballroom, Bella finishes greeting various nobles and is left standing with her mother and our girl's deeply toxic uncle. Her mother drops the fake sweet act, insisting she is only pushing her so hard because she truly cares. Her father immediately jumps in, demanding they secure a top-tier match while the public still worships her as the Golden Rose. He insists whoever she marries must be absolutely worthy of her status. Bella entirely agrees with this assessment. She mentally decides that whoever claims her must completely match her stellar reputation. Scanning the room, her eyes lock onto Duke Cedric, and she decides he is the absolute brightest and most noble prize available. Spotting Cedric grabbing a drink, Bella slides over and puts on her best flirtatious voice, acting absolutely delighted to run into him again. The Duke slowly turns to her, his face looking completely devoid of any joy, and brutally asks if they have actually met before. Bella's ego takes a massive, critical hit. She is visibly rattled but quickly glues a fake smile back onto her face. She apologizes for her boldness, introduces herself, and immediately uses our girl as a stepping stone. She specifically points out that she is the cousin of the disgraced girl who was banished to the convent, before offering overly dramatic prayers for his family's continued prosperity. The surrounding crowd immediately starts murmuring, their eyes glued to the drama. Cedric leans in dangerously close to Bella's ear and coldly whispers that he made himself perfectly clear before. He reiterates that he has absolutely zero interest in becoming entangled in anything unseemly. Bella's soul practically shatters at the icy rejection, but she forces a polite nod and claims she completely understands. The onlookers, however, misread the entire interaction from afar. Seeing the Duke whisper in her ear, they immediately assume it was a deeply secret, intimate exchange, loudly gossiping about how absolutely perfect they look side by side. A random girl scurries up to Bella, desperate for the tea, and asks what they were whispering about to look so wonderfully mysterious. Bella expertly spins the brutal rejection into a romantic victory, coyly claiming the Duke was merely making up for her shortcomings. Before anyone can ask follow-up questions, she abruptly excuses herself for some fresh air. Even as other guys swarm her, practically begging for her attention or offering to sit with her, she completely brushes them all off. Walking away, Bella stews in total frustration. She is supposedly the Rose of Genoa, the woman everyone admires, yet she feels like absolutely nothing has actually changed. She realizes she is still completely haunted by our girl, frustrated that people constantly associate her with the Listerwell name and all its messy baggage. Just as she is spiraling into a dark mood, Albert approaches, noting she looks deeply troubled. Bella tries to deploy her fake innocent smile, but mentally panics, realizing Cedric's cousin is the absolute last person she wanted to bump into right now. Albert smoothly points out that her expression was incredibly dark when she walked away from the Duke. Realizing she has been caught, Bella immediately crafts a massive lie. She claims there was a ridiculous misunderstanding where Cedric assumed she was desperately in love with him, swearing she never harbored such scandalous feelings. Albert plays right along, noting Cedric was quite rude to her, but heavily praising how expertly she smoothed over the entire mood. Hearing this praise, Bella mentally evaluates Albert. She notes he is a kind man about to inherit an earldom and considers him a total waste on his current fiancée, Daphne Laurel. She decides there is absolutely nothing stopping her from taking him for herself. Wondering what a ruthless businessman actually wants in a woman, she confidently decides she possesses exactly what Daphne completely lacks. Playing the ultimate vulnerable victim, she lightly touches his arm and asks what a mere viscount's daughter could possibly accomplish on her own. She leans in dangerously close, practically hugging him, and whispers that she has always dreamed of climbing higher until everything that glitters is within her reach. She promises that if he opens the path for her, he absolutely will not be disappointed. Instead of melting into her arms, Albert grabs her face and completely halts her advance. He drops the polite act and lays out the cold, hard facts. He explains that his fiancée comes from an impeccable family and is a crucial partner in his earldom's massive railway venture. He stares directly into Bella's eyes and demands to know why exactly he should throw away a lucrative partnership for her. He bluntly asks if she can prove she is actually worth more. Bella simply looks up at him with a devilish, terrifying smile, confidently answering that naturally, she can. The scene shifts to the inevitable high society fallout. Gossips are absolutely buzzing with the news that Albert and Daphne's engagement is on the verge of total collapse. The public narrative has completely turned against Daphne, painting her as a useless daughter who is being rightfully cast aside. They mock her for hiding from society under the pathetic excuse of poor health, with everyone loudly agreeing they would absolutely choose Bella over her anyway. In reality, Bella is currently lounging in bed with another man, completely celebrating her malicious victory. The guy laughs, highly amused that the Golden Kingsley heir actually picked her, entirely oblivious to the fact that she is actively sharing a bed with him. Bella asks how the rumors are spreading among the young lords. The guy casually admits that once word gets out that a woman has been thrown aside, it spreads like cheap tavern gossip, especially since he is the one enthusiastically planting the rumors everywhere just like she asked. Bella smirks, declaring Daphne is completely finished. She knows all she has to do is maintain her flawless, perfect woman image until the new engagement is officially settled. But a dark shadow crosses her face. There is one massive problem threatening her perfect future. She realizes she will be completely ruined if she gets dragged down again as the scandal-maker's cousin. Staring coldly ahead, she decides she needs to permanently and properly get rid of our girl once and for all. The scene completely shifts back to our girl's freezing new homeland. She is walking the snowy grounds with the eternally cheerful sister Agnes, who notes that winter has aggressively settled in. Agnes admits she is deeply worried about their dwindling firewood and dangerously low soap supplies. Our girl practically shivers out of her shoes and entirely agrees the cold has taken a brutal hold. Suddenly, they spot the deeply skeptical sister Emma standing awkwardly with 3 incredibly confused children. Agnes immediately asks if Emma has a spare moment. Emma explains that a nearby orphanage tragically collapsed, forcing the convent to take in several displaced kids for a few days. Looking completely overwhelmed, she asks our girl if she could possibly help them out just for today. Our girl is completely silent. Emma immediately panics, heavily regretting her life choices and assuming she just deeply offended a noblewoman by asking her to do manual labor. She awkwardly scrambles to apologize, but our girl just flashes a warm smile and steps right up to the bewildered kids. She admits she has absolutely zero experience keeping tiny humans alive, but Emma quickly reassures her she will be right there to guide her. Cut to a significantly warmer room where a fire is happily crackling. Emma declares bath time a success, noting they just need to dress, feed, and put the kids to sleep. Our girl looks at the aggressively worn-out clothes laid out for them and asks if this is really the best they have. Agnes completely admits they are threadbare, but insists they are the absolute warmest garments they could dig up on such short notice. Staring at the sad pile of fabric, our girl realizes the convent's financial situation is severely worse than she originally imagined. Agnes finishes dressing a kid and asks Emma to run to the kitchen for the meals. Emma agrees, and our girl instantly offers to tag along as backup. As they hustle through the halls, a baby's piercing cry echoes through the corridor. Our girl notes that little Megan is acting up again and urges Emma to hurry. Unfortunately, the crying has completely offended a nearby noblewoman. This toxic lady with fiery hair is dramatically complaining to her 2 friends, loudly demanding total silence in exchange for her financial donations. Emma immediately stops and bows deeply, politely apologizing and explaining the dire situation with the collapsed orphanage. But the salty noblewoman is entirely devoid of empathy. She practically throws a tantrum, outraged that she is expected to stay in a shabby place and endure a wailing infant. Her friends try to reel her in, snarkily pointing out that a poorly managed convent with a single income can hardly do better. Emma remains frozen in her deeply apologetic bow, completely silent. Then, the salty woman spots our girl. Her face twists into a malicious sneer as she claims the former golden child has rather unusual tastes. She brutally suggests the plain, shabby convent suits our girl significantly better than a glamorous ballroom, loudly implying that trash belongs with trash. Our girl completely ignores the verbal assault and stays totally silent. Safely away from the drama, Emma tells our girl she really did not have to force herself to help out. She guesses Agnes already handled the crying baby, explaining the infant just wanted to be held. But Emma's tone drops as she coldly states they cannot let the orphans get used to that kind of warmth. She points out the kids are only there temporarily, and no one knows where they will be shipped off to next. She draws a harsh line, telling our girl that she and the orphans are completely different because she actually has a safety net waiting for her. Once the kids finally pass out, Agnes dramatically shuts the door and breathes a massive sigh of relief. Noting her clothes are absolutely filthy, she excuses herself to change and orders the other 2 to rest. A heavy, deeply awkward silence settles between Emma and our girl. Emma finally cracks and apologizes for taking her total frustration out on her earlier. She admits her own total powerlessness, explaining they can only care for the orphans thanks to the noble's money, which is exactly why she could not defend the kids against the toxic woman's insults. She laments that the kids are forced into a miserable life they never chose. Assuming our girl's life is a total fairy tale, Emma claims she cannot possibly relate because she has a wealthy guardian back home. Our girl's internal monologue completely scoffs at the word guardian. Sure, her uncle took her in, but under his roof, she has never once been allowed to choose anything for her own life. Completely unaware of our girl's internal crisis, Emma rambles on. She admits her own life does not allow for chasing big dreams, but confesses she sometimes shamelessly wishes she could live without financial panic and maybe open a cute little shop. Suddenly realizing she is heavily oversharing, Emma's face turns bright red. She practically begs our girl to forget everything she just heard, deeply confused by her own odd vulnerability, and awkwardly bows to thank our girl for all her help. Right on cue, Agnes returns to the room and immediately spots the awkward energy. She totally ignores Emma's claim that they were not talking about anything and inspects her blushing face with a teasing grin. Watching the two nuns bicker like actual sisters, our girl feels a massive wave of genuine happiness. She realizes she is actually being useful for once. She looks at both women and sincerely thanks them. She reflects that making soap and wrangling orphans is entirely new to her, but it makes her feel incredibly warm inside. Flashing a massive smile, she tells them to never hesitate to call her if they need an extra set of hands. The wholesome vibe is violently interrupted when the scene shifts to Mother Catherine. The head nun is standing with a sharply dressed butler and a very serious-looking man. Catherine formally greets our girl and announces she has a very important visitor, immediately ordering the nuns to leave them completely alone. Left in the room with the mysterious man, the air goes ice cold. He states he practically sprinted from Genoa the second he heard the news, totally shocked she hasn't been informed yet. He drops an absolute nuclear bomb on her life, revealing that her uncle is officially terminating his legal guardianship over her. Our girl's soul practically detaches from her body as she stands there in absolute shock, desperately begging his pardon. The scene shifts to a much quieter, private room where the tension is thick enough to cut with a sword. The mysterious man formally introduces himself as Baron Alfonso Villa and apologizes for showing up completely unannounced. He wastes no time dropping a massive truth bomb, explaining that the high society rumor mill is currently operating at maximum capacity. According to the widespread gossip, her uncle has officially and completely renounced his guardianship over her, claiming he could no longer endure her supposedly disgraceful conduct. The Baron paints a vivid picture of exactly how this narrative was spun. Back in the glittering ballrooms of Genoa, Bella was busy putting on a performance worthy of an absolute Oscar. She stood in the middle of a crowded party, weeping dramatic, perfectly crafted fake tears, crying about how foolish she was to believe they were a real family. Her father played right along, patting her shoulder like a tragic, exhausted parent who had simply tried his best. The surrounding nobles completely swallowed the act, loudly gossiping that shipping our girl off to a convent clearly did not fix her. They ruthlessly labeled her a bad dog that never changes, a totally ungrateful beast who bit the hand that fed her. The Baron explains that witnessing this absolute circus of manipulation is what finally reignited a terrible doubt he had been harboring for 9 long years. He brings up the day of the summer outing in Albright Park. Hearing the location, our girl physically crunches her face in pain. She could never possibly forget that day, as it was the absolute last time she ever saw her parents alive. She is violently pulled back to that memory, remembering how she cheerfully told her parents she was going to stay on the grass to make flower crowns. Her parents sweetly told her to stay safe and completely away from the water. Ever since that moment, our girl has carried a crushing, lifelong mountain of survivor's guilt, entirely convinced that if she had just stopped them from getting on that boat, they would never have died. But the Baron completely shatters her tragic worldview. He explains that he was standing on the shore that day and witnessed the entire accident with his own 2 eyes. He watched the boat start to violently sink. He heard her father screaming in absolute desperation, begging for someone to save his wife because the trees were blocking his path. And then, the Baron delivers the ultimate killing blow to her reality. He explicitly states he watched her uncle and his wife turn their backs on those desperate, agonizing screams and deliberately walk away. Our girl's brain completely blue screens. She starts shaking violently, her eyes wide with total shock as she furiously denies the story. She desperately argues that her uncle was the very first person to call for help and tried harder than anyone else to save her parents. She demands to know why the man would ever take her in as his own niece if he had intentionally let her parents drown. The Baron admits that exact contradiction is the entire reason he remained a coward for 9 years. At the time of the funeral, the uncle looked so utterly grief-stricken that anyone watching would have sworn he was a genuinely good man. But the second the Baron heard the uncle was abandoning his guardianship and leaving her in a convent, the sinister puzzle pieces finally snapped together. The Baron suspects the boating accident itself was a genuine tragedy, but the uncle used that exact moment to secure his ultimate prize. Because the late Viscount left absolutely no will behind, ignoring those screams and eventually forcing our girl to become a permanent nun was the easiest, most flawless way to completely steal the family title and fortune for himself. Having finally unburdened his guilty conscience, the Baron tries to offer her a massive stack of cash as atonement for his 9 years of total cowardice. Our girl is absolutely disgusted. She firmly rejects the money, making it crystal clear she will never accept a payout priced at the cost of her parents' lives, and promptly bolts from the room. She practically sprints through the freezing stone halls of the convent, her mind completely reeling. She realizes the Baron is not the one who owes her an apology. Her mind flashes back to the horrific day her uncle decided to have a literal bonfire with her dead parents' belongings. He had gaslit her flawlessly, claiming that if they kept the items, her parents' souls would never find peaceful rest, forcing her to watch her family's memory turn to ash just for the sake of his own power. That horrific manipulation was exactly why she only had one tiny, half-burnt photo left of them. Running out of breath, the sheer gravity of her stolen life crashes down on her. She is incredibly furious at herself. She realizes she stood by and let her parents' keepsakes be burned to ashes. She let her own reputation be completely dragged through the mud, and she endured years of absolute psychological torture, all while brainwashing herself into believing she owed these parasites a debt of gratitude for taking her in. She stops dead in her tracks, standing directly in front of the convent's grand divine statue. The tears falling down her face are no longer born from sadness. They are fueled by pure, unadulterated rage. She stares at the divine figure and vows that she will absolutely never forgive the monsters who stole everything from her while smiling directly in her face. Remembering the vicious nickname they slapped on her, her sadness completely evaporates into cold determination. She decides that if high society wants to completely ruin her life and use her as a scapegoat, she will stop playing the victim. If they want the scandal maker, she is going to become a true, absolute scandal maker. Walking down the drafty convent corridors, Agnes and Emma are officially on a search mission. Agnes wonders out loud where our girl has vanished to, noting she has never stayed out this late before and seemed deeply troubled earlier in the day. Just as they plan to check near the soap workshop, Emma spots her. Our girl is standing completely still in the freezing cold, dressed way too lightly for the brutal weather. Agnes immediately rushes over, fussing like a panicked mother hen as she wraps a heavy blanket around her shoulders, warning her that her hands feel like absolute ice and she is going to catch a terrible cold. While Agnes fusses over her physical health, Emma looks closely and asks if something is wrong. Our girl completely drops her usual cheerful facade. Looking dead serious, she states she is perfectly fine, but urgently needs to send a letter. Agnes promises to bring her an envelope first thing in the morning. As our girl takes the blanket and heads inside, Emma points out the obvious to Agnes. She notes that something is absolutely bothering her, having never seen such an intense, chilling expression on our girl's face before. Meanwhile, miles away from the freezing convent, the Duke is currently reading a deeply hypocritical letter. It is an invitation from his so-called affectionate Uncle Benedict, urging him to visit Kingsley County to celebrate their victory with the vassals. The Duke visibly cringes at the sheer audacity of the words. He thinks to himself that if those snobby nobles actually realized the victory wine was bought with literal blood and tears, they would not be drinking it so cheerfully. He reflects on his father's completely pointless death. Back then, the imperial family was totally incompetent and could not handle the war against the Kingdom of Firma on their own. While the useless nobles busied themselves by looking the other way, his fiercely upright father volunteered to lead the vanguard, entirely for the sake of his wife, the youngest princess. But the Duke knows the tragic truth of that campaign. There was absolutely no strategic reason for their supply lines to be suddenly cut, and he is entirely convinced his manipulative uncle was behind the sabotage. His mind flashes back to his father's brutal final moments. Lying on his deathbed, his father softly told him it was all right, completely relieved that at least his son survived. His dying wish was for the Duke to take care of his mother, heavily regretting that he could not return to treat her better. He called himself incredibly clumsy, lamenting that he couldn't even give his wife the one thing she truly wanted, which happened to be the exact same massive brooch that magically ended up pinned to our girl at the banquet. Snapping back to the harsh present, the Duke's worldview is completely grim. He concludes that his father always ended up losing everything because of his noble heart and decides that if that is what love looks like, he absolutely wants nothing to do with it. His dark brooding is suddenly interrupted by a knock on the door. A ridiculously cheerful guy strolls in, greeting him like they are at a tavern. This is Edgar, the Duke's longtime friend. The Duke immediately asks him to drop the overly casual greeting, and Edgar playfully shoots back, asking if he should grovel and call him Your Grace instead. The Duke deadpans, telling him to spare him the theatrics. Dropping the joke, Edgar notes it has been quite some time since the Duke set foot in the capital. The Duke admits it feels surprisingly good to be home. Getting straight to business, Edgar delivers his official investigation report. He confirms the Duke's worst suspicions, stating Uncle Benedict was absolutely in league with the Kingdom of Firma, and the treasonous ties run significantly deeper than they originally imagined. Edgar warns it will take some serious time to properly spring the trap. The Duke coldly tells him to take all the time he needs, just as long as the job actually gets done. Internally, the Duke makes a terrifying vow to thoroughly and utterly destroy every single person who had a hand in his father's death. With the heavy treason talk out of the way, Edgar pivots directly to the latest high society tea. He casually mentions the wild rumors surrounding the scandal maker. He spills that the Listerwells officially ended their guardianship, meaning our girl is now permanently dumped at St. Clarissa's convent. Edgar wonders out loud if she genuinely plans to become a nun, shrugging that it makes total sense since her reputation is completely radioactive and she is entirely out of options. As he gossips, Edgar notices the Duke looking distinctly affected by the news. Realizing he accidentally stepped on a conversational landmine, Edgar smoothly changes the subject, asking where the Duke plans to make his annual Holy Feast donation. Without missing a single beat, the Duke names St. Clarissa's convent. Edgar is totally shook, assuming he is doing it for our girl, but the Duke immediately shuts that down, explaining the convent's people actually helped his father during the war. Fast forward to the convent, where Mother Catherine is practically glowing with gratitude. She walks with the Duke, graciously thanking him for his massive financial contribution, noting it will be an enormous support for their struggling grounds. The Duke tells her to think nothing of it. He expresses his own deep gratitude, explaining that the nurses she sent to the front lines were an absolute godsend. Catherine humbly insists they barely did what was expected of them, but the Duke credits their medicine for making his father's agonizing last moments significantly less painful. He offers a small smile, expressing hope that the late Duke now rests peacefully. Wanting to show off their operations to their newest major donor, Catherine offers the Duke a grand tour of the grounds. She happily explains that the convent produces high-quality soap year-round, and his generous donation will finally allow them to finish repairing their workshop. As she gestures toward the soap-making area to explain they only use the absolute highest quality olives, the Duke stops completely dead in his tracks. There, stirring the massive boiling vat of soap and sweating through exhausting manual labor, is our girl. The Duke's brain completely short-circuits. Having known her entirely through her toxic high society rumors, he fully assumed she spent her days in idle luxury, lounging around reading books or doing delicate embroidery. Staring at her working like an absolute machine, his curiosity completely overrides his logic. He turns to Catherine and formally requests a private audience with Lady Listerwell. The scene shifts to a freezing convent room where our girl and the Duke are having a tense standoff. He mentions receiving news she was looking for him. She internally panics, wondering why he traveled to a literal icebox. She figures losing his late father's brooch was a massive shock, and he just wants her to take responsibility. The Duke casually notes she seems adapted, but points out she is working barehanded in the brutal cold. She awkwardly admits she wasn't allowed to pack any winter gear. Surprisingly, the Duke shows a microscopic crumb of guilt. Although he didn't intend for her banishment, he feels responsible. He offers a golden ticket. He will fully fund her seminary tuition or provide seed money for her to live as a commoner under one massive condition. She must completely erase his name from her vocabulary and never mention the banquet incident again. Her spark of hope instantly dies. Realizing he only wants to buy her silence to protect his pristine reputation, she firmly declines the financial bailout. He looks annoyed, asking if the terms offended her. She admits the gag order was unpleasant, but drops a bigger truth bomb. She has zero intention of becoming a nun and is marching straight back to Genoa. He points out she has no money, but she stubbornly insists she will manage. Leaning in dangerously close, he warns her that clinging to pride in a desperate position is a huge mistake. She refuses to back down, clapping back that living without pride landed her in a literal freezing convent, so she is ferociously protecting her remaining dignity. Genuinely shocked by her spine of steel, the Duke apologizes for trampling her dignity and gracefully exits. Left alone, our girl feels like she just let an enormous stroke of luck slip away, but knows it was the right call. She refuses to look like she is begging, especially since Bella's toxic rumors mean her uncle would burn any letter she sends anyway. Meanwhile, in a significantly warmer estate, an intimidating noble lady gets the worst pitch of all time from her butler. He informs her Lady Listerwell is requesting her as a new guardian, enthusiastically reciting her completely fabricated rap sheet of seducing men and causing chaos. Despite the radioactive resume, the lady reveals a plot twist. Ever since a man named Arthur died, she cut ties with that toxic household, but she secretly owes our girl a massive debt. She summons her strictest subordinate, Roxana, ordering her to re-educate the girl. Roxana is entirely shook, but the lady clarifies she is only offering an opportunity. Roxana will determine if our girl is actually worthy. Roxana arrives at the freezing convent looking like a drill sergeant in an expensive dress, warning our girl to brace for absolute hell while Agnes and Emma spy nearby. Coldly stating she won't let anyone tarnish the Count's name, Roxana expects tears or complaints. Instead, our girl gets fiercely determined. She declares that complaining about free education would be the height of arrogance and promises to give it her all. Cue the ultimate high society boot camp. For 5 grueling months, she endures intense etiquette lessons, balancing books on her head and relearning how to eat. In the middle of this exhausting training, Agnes excitedly runs in announcing the terrifying Duke actually sent over high-quality winter garments. Staring at the clothes, our girl is convinced she is hallucinating from the training, entirely refusing to believe the icy Duke actually cares. Back in the glittering ballrooms of Genoa, nobles are practically throwing a parade for Albert, praising him for bagging the two greatest beauties in society. Albert spins Bella around the dance floor, arrogantly bragging about plucking Genoa's golden rose. Bella giggles like she won the lottery, thrilled to be acknowledged as his official lover. From the sidelines, gossips judge them hard, noting Albert's actual fiancée Daphne is still desperately sending him letters. Bella internally sneers at Daphne, cynically believing that privileged people completely refuse to admit when their power has been snatched away. Watching this nauseating display from the shadows is the Duke, internally smirking as he absolutely cannot wait to see how pathetic they both look when reality finally hits. 5 months later, the boot camp officially ends. Sisters Emma and Agnes are waterfalls of tears as they wave goodbye, wishing our girl a safe journey. Riding in a significantly better carriage, she reads a strict letter from her new guardian warning her not to get comfortable, stating she has merely laid the bare minimum groundwork. Our girl aggressively agrees, resolving to work incredibly hard to keep her new ward status. The carriage suddenly halts as heavily armed guards announce they have reached the Genoa castle checkpoints for a strict inspection. Staring at the massive stone gates, our girl takes a steadying breath, knowing this is the exact starting line where she will finally begin violently reclaiming everything stolen from her. In a significantly more luxurious setting, our girl finally sits down with her new guardian, the Grand Aunt. The intimidating older lady bluntly states she deployed her strict subordinate because our girl's toxic uncle entirely failed at raising her properly. When our girl politely claims she had no trouble keeping up with the brutal lessons, the Grand Aunt coldly informs her the training will continue until she actually meets the prestigious Pelin standard. Our girl tries to express her deep gratitude, but the Grand Aunt immediately shuts it down, warning her that overdoing the thank yous will only completely cheapen her own worth. Our girl internally panics just a little bit. She has not seen this woman in nearly 15 years, but she knows the Grand Aunt is a total trailblazer, being the very first female count in the Empire's entire history. Because this powerful woman risked massive political capital to support her, our girl knows she absolutely cannot afford to be a burden. The Grand Aunt immediately addresses the massive elephant in the room, demanding an explanation for her radioactive high society reputation. Knowing her words currently carry zero weight, our girl takes a massive gamble. She politely asks to delay the explanation, arguing that defending herself right now would just sound like pathetic, one-sided excuses. She boldly asks the Grand Aunt to simply watch her actions and demand the truth only when she has actually earned her trust. The Grand Aunt is visibly shocked by the sheer audacity, but she completely respects the hustle. She tables the gossip and aggressively pivots to the most critical emergency at hand, our girl's tragic wardrobe, brutally stating she currently looks more like a destitute monk than a noble lady. Looking down at her drab outfit, our girl mentally calculates how much she can pawn her remaining jewelry for just to scrape together enough cash for a single decent dress. The Grand Aunt is deeply offended by this poverty logic. She asks what on earth our girl thinks a guardian actually does, before dramatically throwing open a pair of massive doors. She reveals an absolutely breathtaking, luxurious bedroom, firmly stating that as long as she is the one backing her, every single thing she wears, eats, and lives in is completely covered. Stepping into the gorgeous space, our girl gets slightly emotional, realizing her late parents had set up a room exactly like this before her toxic cousin arrived and stole her entire life. The Grand Aunt cuts the sentimental moment short and orders her to sit in front of the massive mirror. She casually announces they are using a massive ball next week as her official comeback stage. With a literal snap of her fingers, an absolute army of maids floods the room, hauling in mountains of stunning dresses and sparkling jewels. While coordinating the makeover, the Grand Aunt delivers a brutal reality check. She explains that while commoners can survive through hard labor, a noblewoman's entire occupation and future is high society. She coldly states that right now, the public judges our girl as someone who should be desperately grateful to become some old man's mistress. She warns that if she walks into that ballroom looking pathetic with her shoulders slumped, she will be completely destroyed. She drills in the absolute golden rule. For a noble, relying on pity is nothing less than complete ruin. Hearing the exact same strict advice from her childhood, our girl nods. The Grand Aunt tells her she finally looks presentable and orders her to pick her own lipstick. Staring at the massive array of colors, our girl internally steels herself. She completely understands this upcoming ball is not just a party, it is her first official trial. She decides that if she cowers like she did in the past, nothing will ever change, and society will never acknowledge how unfairly she was treated. She vows to expertly hide her wounds and play the game to win. The scene violently shifts to the glittering ball, where the Grand Aunt is casually chatting with the terrifying Duke Cedric. They exchange smooth business pleasantries, with the Grand Aunt thanking him for joining her as a co-investor, and the Duke praising her incredibly sharp eye. The Duke notes it has been a while since she attended a social event and asks what brought her out. The grandaunt casually drops the bomb that her grandniece is making her fresh debut tonight. Hearing our girl's name, the Duke is visibly intrigued. He points out how busy the Pellin family is and assumes she must be deeply taken with her new ward. The grandaunt completely denies any sentimental attachment, claiming it is purely a business investment. She delivers a flawless metaphor, explaining that a beautifully flowering tree simply ended up with the absolute wrong gardener and nearly withered away. She refuses to let that kind of massive potential die out. She sharply notes that only an absolute fool blames the dying plant, while a true gardener figures out exactly what went wrong and fixes the soil. She confidently tells the Duke to just wait and see, boldly declaring she has absolutely never backed a venture that ended in failure. Right on cue, the massive ballroom doors dramatically swing open. The announcer's voice echoes through the hall, officially presenting Lady Harriet Listerwell. Our girl steps into the light, looking absolutely majestic in a stunning green dress, entirely ready to completely break the internet of high society. Our girl steps into the ballroom looking so majestic in her green dress that half the room practically forgets how to breathe. The crowd is absolutely shell-shocked by her sudden glow-up. The background ladies immediately start whispering, wildly confused as to why the awful girl who made Bella suffer is even allowed in the building. Even her uncle is staring at her from across the room, looking visibly annoyed that his favorite punching bag is suddenly stealing the spotlight. Ignoring the haters, our girl glides right up to Countess Pellin to politely pay her respects, bowing gracefully. She also drops a casual hello to the terrifying Duke Cedric, who's just standing there holding his drink like a ridiculously handsome statue. The Countess welcomes them warmly, and the grandaunt proudly introduces our girl. As she exchanges polite pleasantries, our girl notices the Duke's eyes practically drilling a hole into her. Paranoia instantly kicks in. She remembers his strict warning from their last encounter to never mention his name anywhere. She mentally brushes off her rising panic, convincing herself he is just sweating over the possibility that she might accidentally spill the tea on their secret business connections. But the Countess suddenly pivots the conversation, her eyes lighting up as she recognizes our girl from last year's banquet. She specifically brings up a beautiful song our girl sang back then. Without missing a single beat, our girl flatters her right back, gushing over how the Countess hit the high notes in the original key and how much it stuck with her. The Countess is absolutely mesmerized by the compliment. Standing off to the side, the blonde Duke watches this flawless social maneuvering and actually lets out a genuine smile. Internally, our girl is throwing a massive parade for her grandaunt, deeply grateful for the advance intel on the Countess's musical tastes. The grandaunt politely excuses them from the group, and our girl happily follows, though she is slightly confused by how the usually razor-sharp older woman has completely softened her aura for the party. They end up chatting with an older gentleman who is completely charmed by our girl's composure. Realizing it is getting late, the grandaunt decides to go properly greet the host. Before parting ways, she notes that our girl is surprisingly popular tonight. Our girl mentally sighs, painfully aware that they only know her as the local mad crazy troublemaker. She assumes it will take a literal lifetime to scrub that horrible image clean, but the grandaunt drops some absolute wisdom. She tells her not to be discouraged, because infamy is still a highly valuable currency. If you cannot erase the stain, you use it to your advantage. This clicks perfectly in our girl's brain. If being a scandal maker is her only card left, she will keep her name in everyone's mouth just to snatch all the attention away from Bella. Right on cue, two of Bella's loyal lapdogs approach. With fake sweetness, the redhead asks what she has been up to all year. Our girl immediately recognizes them as Viviana and Caroline. She calmly mentions reflecting at the convent, which instantly triggers the redhead into a self-righteous rant about how shameless she is for dragging the family name through the mud while Bella suffered. Our girl flashes back to how these two used to bully her in the past, while Bella always put on a fake, tearful show to play the kind defender. But our girl is completely done playing the helpless victim. She claps back with lethal precision, declaring her ties with Bella are officially dead. She sweetly reminds them that her scandal was all about playing around with men, so maybe they should be worrying about Bella instead, especially regarding a certain Lord Kingsley. The blonde lackey frantically defends Bella, claiming the Lord clung to her desperately and she had no choice. Our girl just hits them with a devastating smile, concluding that Bella must have found herself a nice new lover then. The redhead starts physically trembling from the sheer disrespect. Our girl casually tells them to give Bella her regards since she did not show up, and smoothly walks away, leaving the mean girls absolutely stunned that she suddenly grew a titanium spine. Needing a breather, she steps out onto the balcony, mentally roasting those cowardly ladies for waiting until her grandaunt left to launch their attack. But her peace lasts exactly 0 seconds before a random man approaches, acting deeply offended by her presence. He dramatically reveals himself as Julian Faith, the man whose heart was supposedly shattered by her letters. Our girl mentally scrolls through her archives and remembers him as Bella's first rejected suitor. Her uncle had forced her to impersonate Bella and take the fall for the harsh rejection. Julian aggressively accuses her of trampling his feelings and treating him like garbage. Our girl coolly shuts him down, pointing out that the incident happened over 3 years ago, and since he actively ignored her at every single party after that, she simply deleted his face from her memory. She quickly realizes he reeks of cheap alcohol and bad decisions. Knowing this is a terrible mix, she tries to make a swift exit. But Julian completely loses it, forcefully grabbing her wrist and yelling that he is held back for 3 years and cannot control himself anymore. Just as he tries to lunge at her, a large hand clamps down on his wrist. The Duke steps right between them, his presence alone dropping the temperature of the balcony. He coldly informs the drunk that his loud voice is completely ruining the party vibes. Julian instantly deflates. He stammers out a pathetic excuse about just being so happy to see her, before practically sprinting for his life. With the trash taken out, the Duke casually notes the man is gone. Our girl bows gracefully, thanking him. But internally she is stressing out, assuming he is highly irritated at having to save her from yet another messy situation. Desperate to escape the awkwardness, she tries to formally excuse herself for the night. But the Duke interrupts her retreat. Flashing a very intriguing smile, he notes that anyone who returns from the St. Clarissa convent supposedly comes back a completely changed person. Our girl pauses in her tracks, turning slowly back to look at him as the silence hangs heavily between them. And that's the end for today's recap. If you had fun, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support keeps the recaps coming. Choose your next binge. At the top is a crowd pleaser, and the bottom is the latest chaos drop. Thanks for watching. Stay comfy, keep your popcorn ready, and I'll see you in the next one.